The night I decided to follow my wife after 24 years of marriage, I believed I was simply letting my fears get the better of me. But what I witnessed in that dimly lit parking lot destroyed everything I had ever believed about love, loyalty, and the woman I trusted more than my own life. My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 52 years old, a quiet man who built his life from the ground up. For 24 years, I was married to Laura, my college sweetheart, the woman who stood beside me when all I had was ambition and a borrowed suit. Together, we raised 2 children, built a home, and created what I believed was an unshakable marriage. Then, everything began to change. It started with little things: late night phone calls she always answered in another room, a sudden interest in her appearance, new dresses, expensive perfume she had never worn before. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I had become too distant. Maybe I was too focused on work. Maybe I was the reason things felt different. Then one evening, she told me she was meeting some friends, but there was something in her voice that didn't feel right, something I couldn't ignore, so I did something I never imagined I would do. I followed her. Keeping my distance, I watched as her car pulled into the parking lot of a quiet restaurant across town. My heart raced as she stepped out of the car. Then he appeared, a man I had never seen before, tall, confident, and completely sure of himself. He walked directly toward her, and she smiled at him in a way I hadn't seen her smile at me in years. Then he reached for her, not in a casual way, but with unmistakable intimacy, and she didn't move away. In that single moment, 24 years of memories felt like they disappeared. I sat there frozen, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my hands began to ache. Every part of me wanted to get out, confront them, demand the truth, and scream. But instead, I stayed exactly where I was. I watched them walk inside together, like two people who had shared this routine many times before. That night, something inside me broke, but something else awakened too. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't confront her. I took action. The very next morning, I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Collins. I told her everything, every detail, every suspicion I had been carrying. She wasn't shocked. She simply nodded and said, "If you want to protect yourself, we need to move quickly." And that's exactly what we did. Within days, I had gathered evidence: photos, phone records, financial statements. One by one, every lie Laura had told started falling apart. It wasn't just one evening. The affair had been going on for months, maybe even longer. The woman I had trusted with my entire life had been living a completely different one behind my back. So I filed for divorce. But I didn't stop there. Laura had always managed several of our joint accounts. What she never realized was that the moment my suspicions began, I quietly started reviewing every transaction. Large amounts of money had disappeared. Transfers were being made that made no sense. Rebecca uncovered the truth. Laura had been spending our money on him: vacations, gifts, hotel stays, everything. When she was finally served with the divorce papers, the expression on her face is something I'll never forget: shock, fear, and beneath it all, guilt she could no longer hide. That evening, she tried to speak to me. With tears in her eyes and a trembling voice, she insisted it had been a mistake. She claimed it meant nothing, but I had already heard enough lies. "I saw you," I said quietly. "I saw everything." The color drained from her face. The divorce moved quickly, but it was painful. The evidence left no room for excuses or denial. In court, everything came to light: her affair, the misuse of our shared money, the deception, and in the end, she lost far more than she ever imagined. The house was sold and divided, with the settlement heavily in my favor. The accounts were corrected after every hidden transaction was exposed. Her reputation was destroyed. But the greatest consequence wasn't financial. It was the silence that followed. Because once everything was over, once the papers were signed and the dust had settled, she was left standing completely alone. The man she had risked everything for disappeared the moment life became difficult. And me? I walked away with something far more valuable than revenge. I walked away with clarity. I had spent 24 years building a life with someone who chose to throw it all away, but I refused to let her choices define the rest of my life. Now I wake up in a quieter home, a smaller home, but it's honest. It's mine. And every time I remember that night in the parking lot, I understand something I couldn't see back then. That wasn't the night I lost my wife. It was the night I finally found myself again.